So until now, our sprinkler has been one system, one single zone that's either on or off. But unless your yard is very, very small, you're probably going to need to break it up into multiple zones. You may have zones that get more light or less light, and also your water pressure simply can't handle sprinkling your entire lawn at the same time. So you're going to need to break that up into zones. So we're going to add these zones now. So the first thing I've done is you can see I added a new tab, clicking this little plus up here, and I'm going to give this tab a name, call it zone control, and description. And I'm going to name this one while I'm at it. Main sprinkler GUI. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to initialize a new global variable called zone config. And this variable is an array variable. So let's start by dragging in a function node. And it will be keep zone config in a global object. And we're going to paste in a little bit of code from the course. So as I said, this is an array. It's called zone config. This array has 4 items, each of them representing 4 different zones, and some information about each one of those items. So name, for example, in the first zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, as well as some placeholder values to dictate on or off, and then some duration, which we'll deal with as we move forward in this demo. Because it's an array, these items are referenced by what's called an index. That index is a number, and that index starts at 0. So zone config 0, for example, would reference this first item here, this zone 1. And so our indexes go from 0, 1, 2, and 3, and each one of those correlates to one of our zones. Say done. And now let's drag an inject node. And all we're doing here is we are initializing our global variable when we deploy our flow. Pull those changes, make sure we're good. And now we're going to add some GUI elements to control our zones. So the first thing we need are some on-off switches. So let's drag in a switch. It's a dashboard switch. And configure it. And we're going to say our group is going to be zone controls. Our tab is going to be the main sprinkler tab so far. Give it a width of 16. I'm going to leave this one checked. Let's add. Now we're back in our switch node. Size 2x1. Label zone 1. Icon default. On payload will be a string, and the value here is going to be add. That indicates that a zone is active, and the off is going to be pause, indicating the zone is inactive. Zone 1. Done. And now based on this, let's drag in a change node and configure it. It's going to be called zone 1 status. I'm going to take one rule here, action of set, and we're going to set this global variable that we just made, zone config. And remember, the index for the first zone is 0. So zone config 0, which indicates the first zone, command. And we're going to pass into that message payload. So what we're saying is that we're going to pass in either add or pause into our array, in this case the first element, command, and we look at that array. Remember that we have this command item here that by default is on. They all say add. But then we're going to change that depending on what our switch is on the GUI. Just hit done. Connect these two. And now let's just repeat this for the additional zones. So for each one of these zones, we change the label, the name again, and most importantly, make sure we have this index right. So 1 indicates the second zone. Okay, and if we take a look at our dashboard, we have some zone controls here. So now we want to add some duration sliders to dictate what the duration of each zone should be. So put in slider and configure it. So go back to our zone controls and give it a size of 2 by 2. I'll leave label blank because we've already labeled it above actually in these switches. Range 0, min, max 6. So this is indicates 6 seconds as our maximum sprinkler duration. Obviously, when we, if we were to use this in the real world, we would change this value. But for the purpose of testing, we don't want any one zone to take too long. We want to kind of see it go through its progressions fairly quickly. So we put a max of 6 seconds per zone. Output only on release, and the name duration zone 1. Done. And now we'll drag in a change node and do something similar to what we did above. We're going to say we modify zone 1 duration, and we're going to create 2 rules here. In the first one, we are going to set global zone config item 0 duration. Set that to message payload. The second rule, we're going to set global zone config, same zone, timeout to message payload. These are 2 values that indicate how long the zone should sprinkle for. And for now, we're setting the same value, but down the road, we will change one of these values a bit. Let's connect and repeat for all of our zones. I've done that very easy. I've done this more than once. Very easy to get the wrong index here. Remember, zone 4 would be 3, 3 is 2, 2 is 1, 1 and 0. Make sure you give that a check before you move on. So now let's take a look at our layout. We'll deploy our changes. We'll look. We have everything here, but we probably want to change how they are organized. So let's go to our layout, and let's put our duration sliders under our on-off switches. Done. have that, but it looks like some things got flipped around. So let's see if we can kind of jog the memory here. And there we go. So time up top, our zone controls towards the bottom, and that's how we want it to look. And before we leave, let's just put some logical comments in here to explain what's happening. I won't do it in the video, but we'll just kind of drag some boxes for now. And we'd say something along the lines of initialize our zone data as an array, turn zones on or off via some GUI sliders, and change the zone duration based on some GUI sliders. Sorry, these were switches. Change the duration based on some sliders, turn zones on or off based on some switches.